Hello everyone, my name is Archie Batra, I'm the Editor-at-Large for The Saint, and I'm joined today by Conservative Councillor Tony Miklinski, who's standing in the general election for the Conservative Party. Thank you very much for joining us. Would you just like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Archie. It's my pleasure to be here. So I'm Tony Miklinski. I stood in the 2017 general election, where we narrowed the gap between ourselves and the winners by more than 7,000 votes. So we're now only 3,500 behind, and I see this constituency very much as a three-way marginal. And my position here as a Fife councillor, I was elected for the councillor in Cooper in 2017, and I take a passionate interest in all things North East Fife.
And so what can you and the Conservative Party offer to St Andrews students?
Well, St Andrews students, first of all, want the same thing as everybody else. They want good jobs, they want to be well paid, they want a safe environment, and I guess when they think about it, they would want to be free of the rancour, the division and the argument that's dogged this country, both in Scotland and the UK, for the last decade. I really do believe that this is starting to undermine our society, and students want to have opportunity. They want to be able to complete their education and move on into an economy and a society that works, and we're heading in the wrong direction at the moment.
Okay, so you talked about rancour and division in the country, and I think a lot of that has come from Brexit and the ensuing discussion about it. Do you think that Brexit is in the interest of citizens of North East Fife and St Andrews students?
Good question. Make it clear that when the Brexit vote was held, I was a Remainer, quite strongly so. I happen to believe that once you hold a referendum, the political classes are saying to the population that we are not willing to make a decision, we'd like you to make a decision, and we promise you that we will implement that decision on completion. And every single party campaigned on that basis in 2017. So having voted Remain, I now believe that we have to follow and implement the result. And I honestly believe now, having seen the way the European Union have negotiated, I always thought it was an imperfect organisation, and the most important thing now for Brexit is to get it done. That's not a cheap slogan. We really need to get it done. We've had paralysis in Westminster for the last 3.5 years. It's endless, it's going round in circles, and if we don't break it, if we end up on the 13th of December with a hung Parliament, we are just going to have another year, 2 years, 3 years of continuing rancour, division and going nowhere. So we have to get it done, and that will be in the best interests of the people of North East Fife.
So would you say that a vote for you is a vote to leave the European Union?
Definitely. The Conservative Party are the only party in this election that's honouring the results of both referendums. The Scottish independence referendum, held only in 2014, we gave the Scottish people the choice. Nicola Sturgeon's very fond of saying it's up to the people of Scotland to make the decision. When we held that election, that referendum, 3.6 million Scots voted. That's 84% of the population, the voting population. 2 million said they wanted to remain in the United Kingdom. So that's the end of that argument. And all the clamour that goes on from the nationalists is really about just finding another opportunity to try to get back and reverse that referendum result. And as for Brexit, we've made the decision. We need to get on with it. And that's what the Conservatives stand for. We're the only party saying, we've got a deal, it's ready to go, give us a working majority, and we'll deliver it and move on.
And so just on the Scottish nationalists, they dominate Scottish seats in Parliament, they dominate seats in the Scottish Parliament, and I'd say that they have a real stronghold in local politics in Scotland as well. And they have explicitly said that they don't want to leave the European Union. Do they not represent the will of the Scottish people now?
Most certainly not. They have the preponderance of MPs and MSPs because of the nature of the electoral process. There is take North East Fife, there is a 2/3 majority for the Union between Labour, Liberal Democrats and the Conservative and Unionist Party. There is a very clear and strong majority. The only reason that the SNP are able to dominate the Scotland election is because it's first past the post. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have that preponderance. And the Scottish National Party have never polled more than 45%, and that was where they peaked in the last referendum. They do not have a majority in this country. The majority spoke in 2014, and that is the voice. Now, if they continue to do well and to get, let's say, a really resounding result in the 21 Holyrood election, when we are talking Scottish issues, then there might be a case to consider that. But as far as I'm concerned, they said once in a generation. That means, by any definition, 20, 25 years. You can't go around looking to change the result of a referendum just because you didn't win. Democracy demands that the loser accepts it.
Okay. So another huge issue in this election for a lot of St Andrews students, and I suppose as well for people of North East Fife, is the environment, and each party's response to the climate emergency that we're currently experiencing will probably decide which way a lot of people vote. What is the environmental policy of the Conservative Party?
So I've just come from the Climate Emergency Action Day on West Beach with all the students and school kids from Bell-Baxter. And Greta Thunberg's done a fantastic job of motivating and galvanising the youth, because they are passionate, and when I spoke to them, they know what they're talking about too. Now, as far as I'm concerned, and my party, we have made a mess of this planet. And it's my generation's fault. We have been profligate, we have used our energy resources without due consideration, and we need not just to repair it now, we need to actually improve it. So we've committed to a zero emissions target by 2045. We're committed to limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. We're putting £500 million into a Blue Planet fund to get the plastic out of the oceans and to limit the effects of global warming. We have plans to change, when they get out of the EU, we'll change the agricultural policy, because the CAP does no favours when it comes to the environment. It encourages poor behaviour amongst farmers, and we will swap that for an incentive scheme for farmers that very much encourages regenerative farming, which will look after the environment far better. So in all these ways, we are looking to put the environment right at the top of our priorities. And they are. And frankly, it's not a political football. It shouldn't be. Every single party is saying more or less the same thing. But what you cannot do is you can't do this overnight. We have to do this without taking a sledgehammer to the economy. The economy's successful economy is what will pay for the innovation, for the research and development, for the new technologies that are going to get us out of this mess. So, for example, we can't turn our back on Aberdeen and the North East. We have to. We're going to have. If we stopped using oil and gas tomorrow, we'd be eating dandelions. We have to have a managed transition as quick as possible that doesn't destroy the economy on which all this depends.
Will there be an economy to save if we don't act now? And I think a lot of people would say that, especially those who take part in like Extinction Rebellion and in protests across the country, that what the Conservative Party offers just simply isn't enough. And that we can talk about, as you say, we can't take a sledgehammer to the economy, we can't, neglect important industrial areas of the country. But ultimately, should we not engage in mobilisation, as a lot of people said, on the scale of World War II? Otherwise, there just won't be a future, and there won't be an economy to save.
Well, not forgetting and keeping up the forefront of your mind that this is a global issue. The UK can't do this itself. And one of the first principles from the Conservative Party is that we have to show leadership on the global stage. And that's why we have put forward some of the most ambitious targets for combating climate change. But this has to be done. It just has to be done. With the best will in the world, you have to decommission coal, fossil fuel plants and transfer to renewables and nuclear at the fastest possible pace. But you can't destroy people's jobs and livelihoods in the process. Remember, the country has to be governed. We have to give people jobs, we have to give people a way to bring up their families, and we have to get the environment saved as soon as possible. But I have to say, the momentum is gathering, and this is rapidly becoming the number one issue. So if we can show the rest of the world that we are leading in this and that we're sincere and that we can turn around some of the American thinking, for example, then we'll be doing more than our bit. And we just have to try our very hardest.
If environmental policy is rapidly becoming a priority for the Conservative Party, why do you think Boris Johnson didn't take part in the Channel 4 climate debate?
So when Prime Ministers decide which debates they take part in, they're doing it from a position of being Prime Minister. So frankly, every Prime Minister, and there are precedents for this, take a view as to which interviews to take part in and which not, because they have a natural lead in the process, because they are Prime Minister. So I don't think anybody can say that Boris Johnson isn't putting himself up for scrutiny. He's attended plenty of debates, so he will attend more debates. He will be cross-examined. He's cross-examined every day by the press. So the decision not to stand there and offer Michael Gove instead was his decision and his advisors'. I'm not party to it. I don't know exactly what was at stake. But it's not because it's not a priority. And Michael Gove is more than adequate to communicate the Conservative policy.
Do you agree with his decision to not take part in the debate?
No.
Okay. So another issue that will affect a lot of students in this election is the problem of affordable housing. And this does primarily affect St Andrews, but there are a lot of students who choose not to live in the town, to live further afield across North East Fife. So if you were to be elected, what policies, what changes would you like to see happen in this constituency and in St Andrews itself in terms of access to affordable housing?
So I'm a Fife councillor. I sit on the North East Planning Committee and North East Area Committee. And I've been party to the discussions on houses of multiple occupation and where students are going to live and where they want to live. And it's not easy. There are two conflicting things going on here. And I hope students will appreciate this. Yes, the St Andrews University and the students, they produced about £250 million plus of investment in the area. They're a critical employer, the most important employer in North East Fife. And we want to see St Andrews University thrive. We want to see them get to where they want to be as the best small university in the world, if indeed they're not already there. But all of that means that because they're based in such a small town as St Andrews, that the infrastructure here is bursting at the seams. And there's another voice that needs to be heard, and that's the voice of people who are resident here all year round and for decades and sometimes 60, 70, 80 years. And the population, when the students are in town, the population is now 55% student and 45% locals. And that's becoming, the word unsustainable is not quite right, but the balance is wrong. And people in St Andrews, the locals, want to have a community that they can recognise as their own, because the students, while welcome, are nevertheless an imported population. So how do you square that? Well, there are a lot of houses of multiple occupation around. How many more should there be? Or should students be invited to live more in halls of residence or bespoke residences, of which many are going up? And I think my personal view, and the view of my party locally in Fife, is that the balance is about right just now, and that we shouldn't be looking to expand HMOs to any great extent. The market will just have to, it means that housing becomes more expensive, and I know that students want to live right in the middle of the town because there's no particular campus, it's all spread out in the town centre. But there's what you want and there's what you need. And most important of all is to have good, secure, comfortable accommodation where you can get on with your studies and enjoy the social life that comes with being a student. But we need to balance it.
So would you say that a vote for you is a vote to not extend HMO licensing?
A vote for me is to keep the balance about where it is. But that vote, I have to say, that decision is with Fife Council, not with government policy.
Sure. But would you seek to influence it at all?
Well, I have influenced it. I voted for the proposal that would keep the HMOs as they stand at the moment. I didn't want to reduce it, but neither do I want to expand it. And I think we need to let this settle and also let their university itself, the university authorities, understand that they are responsible for ensuring that their students have the right accommodation. And just asking the town to cough up more houses, which are currently used by families, is not, I believe, a position that can be defended.
Okay. And then just lastly, I think one of the final huge issues of this election is healthcare and protecting the NHS, having access to affordable healthcare. Do you think that the Conservative Party offers a credible protection of the National Health Service?
Absolutely, the number one priority. All parties are claiming to put more money, billions, into the National Health Service. And the Conservative Party are absolutely up there, 50,000 new nurses. How we've got ourselves into a position where we've got too few GPs and too few nurses, frankly, is a failure of policy over decades. So we're committed to 50,000 new nurses. We're committed to millions of new GP hour interviews. This is a devolved issue, of course. This sits with the Scottish Government. But for example, in North East Fife, I personally sit on the Integration Joint Board for Health and Social Care. I was lobbying hard inside the IGB as a voting member to make sure that the out-of-hours service for St Andrews and its students stays at St Andrews Community Hospital. I voted for that. I argued for it. A lot of other politicians have stood up and said it was me that did it. Well, I was in there voting, and I was watching it unfold. And I made sure that happened. But the NHS is our most precious jewel. To have free at the point of care health services is just critical to the way we live in the United Kingdom. People said that we're going to put it on the table and sell it to the Americans. I really do not understand that at all. There's something like 7-8% of services already privatised. And when you talk to the people who are part of that, it's because we're getting a better bang for our buck. We're getting as good or better service for less money, which allows the NHS to spend the money on other areas. So to say there's no such thing as no role for privatisation in the NHS is fundamentally flawed. We need to get the right balance. At the moment, it's 7%, 93%. I don't see it going much beyond that. But for example, in the social care environment, because it's now health and social care, 80% of people in North East Fife who are in care homes are in private care homes, paid for by the council. There's only 20% of them are council homes. So we're already well down that road, and it works.
But don't you agree that a lot of people just simply won't believe Conservative promises on the National Health Service? We're talking about 50,000 nurses. I think it was something like 9,000 were already trained within the NHS, and you can't deny that there have been talks with America about trade deals, and that has to affect the NHS.
This is just, I mean, really, this is where it gets crazy. The great expose by Jeremy Corbyn, shock horror, we've been talking to the American trade officials about future trade deals. I mean, come on, what do you expect us to be doing? We're looking out for the country's needs. Post-European Union, we're going to have trade deals right around the world, including with America. But the idea that we're going to say to American drug companies, you can charge us 3 times what we're charging us at the moment, I mean, why would we do that? We want best value for money, and we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We have clout. We are going to do deals with Americans, and we'll do deals with other countries that are emerging, like India and China. Critically, we want what's best for the UK and for the UK taxpayer, and we always put that at the top of our priority, unlike, for example, the Labour Party, who have not learned the lesson that you have to earn wealth before you spend it. We are always doing things in an economically responsible way, and there will be no wholesale sell-off to the United States or big pharma companies under the Conservative Party. It ain't going to happen.
So the NHS will not feature in trade talks with the Americans?
I'm certain it will feature. I'm certain that any responsible government, in talking to the Americans or anybody else, the question will be, what can you offer us that is as good or better than we get at the moment for a lower price? And if they can offer something, then we should take advantage of it, as long as we do it on our terms.
So there is a place for private provision within the National Health Service?
Oh, there is already, and there should be, as long as it's improving the value for money and the quality of care that we're offering our people.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anything you'd want to say to the St Andrews population about why they should vote for you in general?
Well, I'll say this. I got into politics only 3 years ago because my wife caught me shouting at the television. And I was shouting at the television because Nicola Sturgeon was on there. And I just believe that the nationalists are trying to sell us a Brigadoon Scotland, where it's always sunshine, we're all rich, we're all looked after, and we're all happy. If she gets her way, were she to get her way, she would take us over an economic cliff. We would lose £9 billion of subsidy from the UK, we'd lose 50,000 jobs in the defence industry, we would be cut off from the rest of the UK, where we do 60% of our trade. We wouldn't be best friends. Look at the acrimony that has been caused over the EU. This would be a desperate thing to do. And I always ask nationalists, what is it that's driving you? Where is your grievance? Which persecution is being forced upon you? And the answer is there isn't. So people need to think very hard about the risk they're taking with their lives. If you want to be paid in the groat for your pension or your mortgage, then good luck to you. But there'll be a massive devaluation, and just don't believe them. Look very hard. If you watch the Andrew Neil interview of Nicola Sturgeon, you'll see the reality of what she's offering. And that's what I stand for.
Tony Miklinski, thank you very much.
My pleasure.